The recording has started. Welcome to the Goal 3 Shared Vision call. And I'm going to save my voice because I know I have plenty of great facilitators on the call. So introduce us to Goal 3 and what we're doing. Anybody who wants to, I will, and I'll let one of you pick a popcorn question. So, tag, you're it.
A popcorn question. Has anybody thought of one already? No, because I could throw one out there. I don't know.
I have one, but I don't know if we've done it already, and that might be why it's in my head.
What's your popcorn question?
What's your favorite holiday food or winter food?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Okay, we haven't asked.
I'll vote for that one. I was gonna ask about like your favorite season, but this is a little bit more apropos as the holidays are arriving. I'll go first. I believe that we all know each other. So as far as facilitation goes, I think it'll be a breeze. My favorite holiday food is this like Creole cornbread stuffing. You can get the recipe for it off of like the Emerald Lagasse recipes or whatever. Obviously, like I kind of zhuzh it up to be my own, but like funny story, like very quick story. When I used to mentor for Big Brothers Big Sisters, I had a little who she came over after Thanksgiving, and I gave some of this to her for like, she just came to my house and she didn't like stuffing, and I was like, just try it. She liked it so much that like later in the year, her birthday was in May, I asked her what she wanted me to cook for her birthday, and she asked me to make this Thanksgiving stuffing in May. So it was that good. So look, if you look up Emerald's Creole cornbread stuffing, it's real good. That's my favorite. And I'll popcorn to Mike.
That sounds pretty amazing. Yes, my favorite holiday food. I would say what I love is growing up. My family is Lebanese, and so at like the big holidays, we would have a combination of traditional sort of spreads where like a potluck thing, but then there was also this sideways parallel track of Lebanese food, which is like grape leaves and kibbe and all of those things. And what I love is that those could live together, because I'm pretty easy when it comes to food, but I guess the mix is my favorite. I'll pass to Peter.
Well, that's not fair. I mean, my two favorite, so my side of family is Greek, and but the two great food capitals of the world are Istanbul and Beirut. And we have, this isn't the holiday food, but we make up this thing called 7 spice mix. And Mike, if you don't have the recipe, I'll send it to you. It's just an amazing thing. And do you have it?
Please do.
Yeah, okay. It just takes a little pinch, and we've started using it like everything, but my wife makes up a shepherd's pie with this, and she puts a pinch in this thing. And if I'm coming home from work and she's cooking with it, the kitchen exhaust goes out of the side of the house, and I can smell it from a block away. I mean, it's just so aromatic. But actually, my favorite holiday food is another ethnic food. So my wife's half Ukrainian, half German. Of course, Ukraine's in the news lately. And you hear about pierogies, but the Ukrainian version is called pyrogi. And so it's a dumpling. It's filled with mashed potatoes and cream cheese and onion, and I think a little garlic. And she pinches it together and boils it up, and then smothers it in butter. And I mean, it's practically floating in butter. Well, they don't float, but I mean, they're just in butter. But the best part is, and you can eat a few of these things and, your arteries are jammed, but the best is when you take it from overnight, put it in a refrigerator, and the next morning you fry it. And so you just crisp up the 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 pasta side of it, and it's just absolutely great. So I try not to go to the doctor after I eat those things, but it's absolutely super.
I just want to say that I think we're modeling the Goal 3 vision work really strongly right now.
Yeah, well, and then I do a lot of my barbecue stuff is drives a lot of Middle Eastern food, so lambs and stuff. So anyway, so with that, Tiffany, you're popcorned.
So this is kind of generic, but I love desserts, and I love how during the holidays, everywhere you go, people have plates of cookies out or just random dessert items. And so I like being able to eat all of it without feeling shame or guilt. But I really just love, the Christmas time and holiday time cookies that are out and about and available. So Cecilia, that leaves you.
So it seems like we have an ethnic mix. So my family's Taiwanese, and for Thanksgiving, we usually have sticky rice stuffing. So it's it's a more glutinous rice, so it kind of sticks together, and it's usually got like mushrooms and chestnuts and this Chinese sausage and stuff. So it's in lieu of stuffing, we make a sticky rice stuffing, and we usually probably only have the turkey just so we can have sticky rice stuffing. And then in our house, or when we're around, because we're Asian, we fight over the dark meat and not the white meat, which is really interesting when I go to other people's homes for Thanksgiving. And so when I'm not with my family, I am tasked to make cheesy potatoes, but that's a whole different story. So I need somebody to help scribe, because I forgot what Mike's favorite holiday food is. Now I'm like just really hungry. So the agenda I'm going to throw in the chat, and we're going to just ask everybody to help scribe stuff. How's that? Okay. And I'm going to turn it over to Stu. Before I turn it over to Mike to talk about shared vision, does anybody have any updates on like things going on in the community? It's Global Entrepreneurship Week. So that's kind of a shared vision of something. Our Global Entrepreneurship Week in Tulsa started off with Black Tech Weekend. So Felicia Hatcher was here with Fallon Wilson, Haji Fleming, my friend Dominic, who I met in Bahrain, just like a whole bunch of epic Black ecosystem builders converged on Tulsa. We are the site of the largest race massacre in modern history. If anybody's watching Watchmen, you will know that. And so I think it's incredibly amazing that we kicked off our Global Entrepreneurship Week with Black Tech Weekend. So that's a shared vision of where we want to go, as opposed to where we've been. So anybody have anything going on for GW or Tiffany? You guys have stuff all the time in Conroe.
We do, and this year, since they now have the rural expansion, we have events in all throughout Central Arkansas. And so I'm actually in one of our communities now in Cabot, and it's been interesting really trying to encourage entrepreneurship in our small communities, because there's so much just knowledge share on what an entrepreneur is, and how that word entrepreneur has a lot of connotations that in rural communities is not always received well. So this week in particular has been a learning experience for me on how to talk in a language that people can hear and understand and are receptive to, and has a positive connotation. So we have a lot of small business celebrations as opposed to entrepreneur promotion. But yeah, today we learned about government contracting. So how can you, as a startup, small business, sell your products or services to the government? And I learned that the government will buy anything that anyone is selling, which was not what I would have thought, but it was really good. Just really not exciting though. What about you, Louisa? Is Epicenter doing anything awesome this week?
There's obviously some global entrepreneurship things going on. We had a live taping of our podcast called the Grind Set Podcast, Grind Set Mindset, and it was a really nice kickoff to the week. They also did like a women in entrepreneurship, like it was like Black women in entrepreneurship and just women in entrepreneurship in general. So that was cool. I believe there will be some other things that are going on, but I'm not super involved in them as I am getting ready to go out of town for Thanksgiving. And I'm really looking forward to that too.
Wait, are you going to Dallas or Seattle?
I'm going to Dallas, Houston, and Seattle.
Oh my gosh.
Which is why it's taking quite a bit of effort to plan for this trip. But yeah, I'm going to Dallas and I'm buying a car when I'm there and driving to Houston and then flying to Seattle, flying back, and then driving from Dallas to Memphis and taking a nap after all of that. But I have to see all of my people. So yeah, but lots of really cool stuff going on. We just had a retreat at Epicenter and talked a lot about like Epicenter's role in facilitating or like bringing about economic justice and how adjacent our entrepreneurship efforts are to like poverty alleviation, if any. Like I obviously have lots of opinions on that, and like what our true role is, and how we should not conflate it. Like when we talk about our vision, I think sometimes organizations conflate their mission with like adjacent missions around them, and like how can we do the right thing and honor like the like collective efforts of everybody to create a good society while still focusing on like the core of what we do. So that's kind of like a lot of words, but really what I walked away with was making sure that like in our organizations on the like practitioner level, which will roll up into the field level, like do we have a good idea or understanding of what our vision truly is, you know? So.
Peter, Mike, are either of you involved in anything like convening? Well, Mike's always involved in convening stuff.
Just a quick, point of interest maybe yesterday and today. And I was not physically there, but it's the work we've been doing for a few years. So the Earth Commission, which is 19 scientists from around the world, got together in Washington, in fact, for the first time. And they're going to be, over the next couple of years, doing the first planetary level assessment of the whole. So the same way you hear about 1.5 degrees Celsius for climate, they're going to be creating the first version of that for the planet Earth. For oceans, nature, land, freshwater, and climate. And so they had their first meeting yesterday and today. So that's been sort of on the horizon for years, and it was kind of exciting that it's finally happening. And I have to say that I think there's enormous implications for entrepreneurial ecosystems and for ecosystem builders with sustainability work, and where this is all eventually going to be, whether we actively respond to this or whether we're reacting to the changes that are happening one way or the other. I would say the things that we are working on as a group and the structures that we're putting in place and the practices that we're sharing, it's going to be incredibly relevant very soon.
Excellent. So I know, Mike, you've been in conversation maybe with Rick Smyer as we, so Rick is convening some people in January, and if that piques anyone's interest, let us know, because I think it's a bunch of people sitting around talking about exactly this stuff. So, Peter, what do you have going on before we dive deep into trying to come up with missions and visions?
Yeah, I'm, trying to continue to stir the pot. About 2 weeks ago, I participated in a panel that was organized by the National Association of State Workforce Agencies and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. It was on local responses to the future of work. And my panel was primarily, in fact, the entire conference was focused on sort of government responses to this stuff. And my small contribution was to say, well, really, the folks that are doing the work on the ground are the NGOs, the not-for-profits, the organizations that are, the volunteer groups and so forth. And when we contemplate changes in how work is being restructured, we really, those are the groups that are on the front line addressing these concerns, and brings in entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial ecosystems and so forth. The other is that I think if I should ask to get a commission on this, because I've been plugging this book so many times. I've been contemplating the consequences of a book. It's and I'll post it on the group chat, but or the site. It's called Invisible Women: Data Bias in a World Designed for Men. You know about this book?
Yes, I read it, or I listened to it when I was driving back and forth.
Yeah, so Carolyn Criado Perez. It has been really mind-altering in a lot of the stuff that I do. Ranging from thinking through so one of the things I've asked friends of mine to do is to put together a map of Chicago and Cook County and show the distribution of 18 and older women versus men by block across Cook County. And I expect it's going to be clumpy. It's going to be clumpy in the sense of, you're going to have places where there are more women than men, percentage-wise. I have my guesses as to where they will be, but I want to line that up with where business is located and where jobs are located. And my guess is that the jobs are going to be different from where the women are clumped up in terms of where they live, which speaks to the issue of, well, are those jobs really accessible to working age women? One of the points of the book, I think, has been, and this actually comes in the story, I don't know if you remember this one about snow plowing in Scandinavia, and they discovered that when they analyzed the pattern of women traveling in their daily lives versus men, the tendency to the decision to plow the arterials benefit those who go from point to point for jobs. That's more often men than women. Whereas women who have caregiving responsibilities, and as the Prime Minister of New Zealand just said, she's a woman, she multitasks. That really they depend on use of side streets, and they decided to plow the side streets first, and it's resulted in a cost savings, health benefits, fewer slip and falls, and so forth. Well, that got me to thinking, well, if that's the case, then a good economic development strategy, one that speaks to the needs of women, not just, but more so than would be men, are development strategies that create jobs where people live, where they live. And that's very much around entrepreneurship. That's very much around, small business startups and how you grow them and so forth. So it's given me a lot of food for thought. Like I said, I've asked somebody to do the map for Cook. I have a pretty good sense about where things are in my other life when every 10 years I get invited to draw election district maps for Cook County. And I'm one of those redistrictors that everybody hates. So
we don't hate you, Peter.
Yeah, but I do. I mean, I have some facility, and I understand where things are and how they lay out and where people are. So I can eyeball some of this stuff, and I'm really curious to see whether my guesswork is lines up with what I think is happening.
Yeah, I think Tiffany and Louisa, I will tell you that in reading the book or listening to the book, it definitely expanded my mind.
Yep.
And really annoyed me at the same time.
Yep.
Would you mind putting the name of the book in the chat?
Mm-hmm. I'll do it right now.
Yeah.
So, but
I'm thinking about buying this book for every one of my board members, by the way.
I think that would be absolutely fabulous. So,
well, I wish I had the money for it, but we'll see. I mean,
but it's definitely where, and it does tie into part of the shared vision, part of the inclusive field thing, is when we take the information solely from people who write the information. And when the information is written by, it's like the AI challenge, right? So AI is very skewed towards young white men. And they talk about facial recognition, not recognizing women and people of color, things like that. It's because they only know what they know. So if you know that the symptoms of a heart attack that people know about, the striking pain in the chest, the numbness of your arm, those are male symptoms of heart attacks. And that's what they're taught in school. So if you don't have those symptoms, as a woman, most women experience lower back pain and nausea. And that's a female symptom of a heart attack. Or, using crash test dummies and knowing that they've only started using what they call female crash test dummies since 2000. They never put them in the driver's seat. And they're actually built like little men and not women, because women are biologically different. Our hips are in different places, our necks and shoulders. So your head never really sits on the headrest. So you're more prone to whiplash. I mean, all kinds of things. So you can definitely go down those rabbit holes. But thank you for bringing that up, Peter. I think being mindful, as we talk about mission and vision, to think about this inclusivity, I think is huge. And then I like what Louisa said about not putting in everyone else's goals or all the other goals into mission and vision. That's ecosystem building, right? So if we're going to focus on the mission and vision of ecosystem builders, then that's a different thing than entrepreneurship or whatever. So I'm going to turn it over to
poverty alleviation or whatever, right? Like we want to definitely make sure we honor and respect and keep in mind and like remain like conducive to collaboration, but like I would venture to say that like ecosystem building is not the same thing as poverty alleviation. Although if we do it well, we will have indirect effects.
Well, so I mean, I told you that I have guesses as to where the population of women will be clumping up, and I think we're going to find that there's a lot of clumping that goes on in communities that are low income and are also communities of color, and so so an emphasis on, and by the way, I don't think that these solutions are exclusive to women, but I do think if you think in terms of who benefits more, I think this would be the case. But jobs that you can walk to, I think helps everybody in the community, but one that opens up a lot of economic opportunities for women that wouldn't have the opportunity because they can't take the 2 hours it takes to commute to the other side of town and still take care of their kids and still do all the other things that they have to do, especially if they're and this again is not exclusive, but when you can compound it with whether they may be a single head of household or something else like that. So and these aren't roles that should be relegated to women in terms of caregiving. It is the case. So right. I mean, given the case, how do you deal with that reality, and at the same time, spread the responsibility so it's not just the case for women. But anyway, just my 2 cents.
All right, Mike, lead us.
Lead us. I'll change the active verb there maybe to I'll invite you. But let me just share this again. As I'm pulling this up, any thoughts or questions or anything that stuck with you from before that with our time now you either want to revisit or had further thoughts on or any of that?
None at this time.
Okay, if not, yeah, not at this time. You reserve the right to ask a question later. Good.
Yes.
Cool. I'll just quickly burn through these. Just a quick reminder. We framed this as looking at the situation of complexity, where this is not, a small top-down organization where, a chair of the board or a CEO can set a vision and say, okay, everybody align to this. We have a much more interesting situation than that, thank goodness. And so we started looking at what these conditions of systems, transformation and systems leadership look like, and trying to find our place in that. We offered and looked at this creative process model from M.G. Taylor. I just added a couple notes on there. This is not a linear process. This is not like first you do A, then you do B, then you move along this thing. But rather these things are all connected. Some of these things do flow and follow from others, but I would say that if there's one thing that I might impress upon you, it's that vision processes as we experience them are very much tied into the actual work itself. Trying to lay out a nice quippy statement that elegantly captures where you're trying to get to without actually digging into and understanding the work and even recognizing what work, especially in our type of situation, is already happening, is pretty disingenuous and disconnected, which is obviously not the point of what we're trying to do. Also the point of both and. So, we can think of visioning processes as both something that leads the field and leads our work, but also as one that follows from and learns from our work, and that those processes are not mutually exclusive. We can think about those things developing and growing together. We talked about identity quite a bit, and I think this is roughly where we sort of landed, was talking about how we understand concepts of identity and start to build this, especially across multi-stakeholder groups who each have a different picture of the whole. And we were starting to dig into this definition of vision and way of thinking about vision. And there's a model in here that I know I've talked about with, I think just about all of you probably, but again, seeing here in bold and italics, whatever you do, don't just write some nonsense vision statement. So getting in and actually doing the work we should view that as actually building our vision, and hopefully we do. That next line, visions need to address the new system at all of the vantage points from philosophy to task. I have 2 slides later, down there is the vantage points model, which we can spend a little time looking at and see how that might be helpful as a framework. Does everybody have this? By the way, I'm happy to share this link again, but if you want this deck, it's something that I just put together very much from different pieces for this call. Obviously some M.G. Taylor stuff, but some other thoughts. So happy to just put that again in the,
Can you put that into the agenda?
Yeah,
I think it's,
definitely.
That would be great. So Mike, I know you and I talked about vision because I shared a vision that I was working on for another organization, and and you said you said something to the effect of, while missions can be broader and future forward, um, vision is, you like shorter visions. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, so I would say that over my years doing this work, one thing I've realized is that everybody has their own view of this. And we really need to see things like, vision and mission and values as tools that you should make whatever you need them to be useful. That said, I would say that over time doing this, what I've seen people sort of move toward or see as a way of using those tools effectively is, and what's the meaningful separation of them? Because a lot of people will name something that they would say, this is our vision. And I would look at it and say, most people would call that a mission. And so extremely practically, I would say that personally what I've found useful is to be able to have a super short, super simple, readily available on the tip of your tongue, kind of inspiring description of that world you're trying to get to, and using that as a vision, which you say, almost impossible, but the thing that we're excited about, the thing we're trying to create together is this. And again, if that's manufactured as sort of a a quippy thing that doesn't actually reflect the ambition of what the work actually is or what people actually want or are trying to do, then it's worse than not having anything. But at its best, that's the thing that people can really rally around and very simply communicate and know, yep, this is that thing we're all trying to get to together. And so again, when I personally say vision, that's what I'm talking about. When we say values, ideally that's the sort of very basic beliefs that I would say form in a mental model, form the foundation of the way you're doing this. And here's what we believe. Ideally, that's something that matches up personally and individually and builds to be something that is expressed communally. And so I know that we've had drafts of this and versions of this throughout this work. I think we know a lot of the ones we talked about. This informs culture quite a bit, and so there's a lot of connection with that work. But I would say personally, these need to be aligned. There needs to be, they need to all be pointing in the same direction and kind of come from the same place. Then when we're talking about what we believe in, what forms the foundation for our work, as well as where are we trying to get to, that they should feel like they're part of the same picture. And then to me, the connection of those two, of our foundation of who we are, and again, this connects with identity, who we are, how we see ourselves, what we believe deeply as individuals and as a community, which is values. The combination and the space between that and this vision we're trying to get to together is what you might call the mission. And some people would say that that can be a description of, and I would say it fits the language as well. So, I was a high school Latin kid, and mission meaning to send, so it literally suggests that movement outward. And so going from this identity foundation to this other place, this vision, the mission, as I like to think of it, is what does that journey look like? What are the things we do to get there? You can make that as general or specific as you like, but usually that describes the actual work. So here's the way we're planning on getting to that thing, kind of at the right level of detail to be able to communicate with people that if they saw that, if they heard the values, if they heard the vision, if they heard the mission, they'd have a really good idea, not only of what your work is, but sort of the character of it, the spirit of it, the culture. You get a lot of cues about all of that through those three pieces. Does that jive with what you were asking, Cecilia? Great. Any thoughts or questions on that? I'm wondering if that resonates with people.
Yeah, I actually do. So I can see a situation where in the process of pursuing sort of the overall thrust of ESHIP, that we could talk about, here's the ESHIP principles, and here's the ESHIP mission. But because it's so situational by community, I mean, would it make sense to leave the value question open? I mean, not the value, the vision question open.
I mean, I'll say that there's so many ways to look at this. One that I've heard is that there's many different visions we're talking about.
Yeah.
And so one is, what is the vision for ESHIP as an event? One is, what is the vision for the ESHIP community? One is, what is our vision for ecosystem building as an activity? One is, what is our vision for entrepreneurship or for entrepreneurs? Another is, what is our vision individually at these community levels, which obviously has to be something that lives, in a kind of multivarious state. And so I think none of these things are exclusive, but the recognition that they are in fact all distinct is something to navigate a bit.
Yeah, but I could see that these could all share a common set of values, principles, and even mission, because mission is really a matter of a set of processes as you're describing them.
Yeah. And back to that flotilla point, that a lot of people, their mental model, like I'm using that language a lot, but, thinking of how do we all get on the same cruise ship in the middle of the ocean so that we make sure we're doing the same thing, versus the flotilla of a lot of smaller boats that through a set of understandings and, whatever sets of connections and webbing between, that we all know we're going the same direction. We're choosing to do this. But everybody still has their own boat. Anything else from anybody?
So I think we also talked about thinking about a pledge, more so than because it is really hard to quantify all these interested parties and what we're trying to achieve. I think a vision, almost like a tagline, is helpful. It's a rally cry. It's a call to action, something like that. And that's something that we as a group can definitely put together or get closer to. And then a pledge, like what do we as ecosystem builders work towards together? And I think that if we can get closer to a vision and a pledge by the summit, that would be a huge win. I don't know. I mean, mission seems to be a much harder thing to synthesize down to something that works for everybody. To Louisa's point, so many different.
I mean,
agendas.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're fine.
Just in the spirit of the flotilla model, I could picture, sort of this shared foundation and say, here's the set of values that we generally all sign up to and agree that's part of this. Ideally it's specific enough that you would say, okay, there's some choices being made there. One of the things about values is you don't want them to be the one that you say, well, of course, everybody has integrity, they should actually represent something significant and distinct to say, here's what makes this community unique, separate from the baseline table stakes that you say, well, to operate in the world at all, you need to be A, B, and C. So it's separate from those. But if there's some agreement on that foundation and values, and there's some agreement on that vision of what we're all trying to get to me, even if there's a general kind of vector, direction and distance understood with that, you can let people kind of find their own mission within that and say, here's where we're all starting from, even if it's various places, but here's what ties us together. Here's the vision that unites us. And then you can imagine individuals and organizations saying, my mission in that thing, which ought to be sufficiently ambitious, but also general enough that people can find their place in that. And they could define their own mission within that and say, the way I'm getting from here to there is by doing this, and the way that my organization or my community is advancing this is this way. kind of finding their path in that. So just to say that I'm agreeing with you. I think the starting points are more where are we now and where are we trying to get, and then playing with what's in between.
I like it. What do you think, Tiffany?
I'm looking at this visual and I'm listening to Mike. And I think it's the impatient person in me, because I just think, man, all this is going to take so much time.
Right.
Preaching to the
It can be
choir.
daunting. It can be really daunting. Yeah, it can be really daunting. I'll say why I put this up. This came from a Rockefeller Philanthropic Advisors deck. And I'm not sure if they pulled it from somewhere else, but what I thought was interesting about this is just the way that this relates, that space of these meta narratives, the worldviews, visions, and paradigms, and the way that that can actually interact with an incredibly complex set of stakeholders with different levels of Zoom and different levels of ways of relating to a complex space. And to say, this gets back to that point about both and, this is not a top-down process. It's not exclusively a bottom-up process. It's not really even a middle-out process. It's all those things together at once. And so, in some ways I would say that the work is figuring out how do we integrate that? How do we connect those in meaningful ways? What does it look like for the individuals who are part of this to actually relate to those domains in the middle? Because they definitely do, and they identify in those spaces. What does it look like for a vision that actually helps guide this type of discourse to both inform and be guided by what's happening in the space below it in this visual? So just to say we're not the only ones, comfort with complexity and recognizing the reality of that complexity. Sometimes it takes some effort, Tiffany, thanks for raising that. But I think there's something to be said for engaging with it. And in some ways that's the real thing, is engage with it.
I have a separate question. It might be off topic, but so thinking of, an organization that puts forward this type of visual, do most organizations create the organization first and then attract people to participate, where ESHIP, everyone is, the people are here, like we're already attracted to this, but there's not that defined vision or values, or like, are we doing it backwards than most?
Yeah, I would say that the way ESHIP has emerged is considered by many the new way, which is to say that this is not, and especially what ESHIP is aspiring to now, which is spreading out the ownership of this, which again makes something like a vision much more complicated. But ideally, you can do things across organizations and across people that one person or one organization could never imagine. And so I think the way that this has formed incredibly organically of, Kaufman kind of putting a stake out and saying, here's our aspiration, is to explore this space of ecosystem building, to see if we can put something out there, and if there's energy for this and what people can build together around this. We don't have the answers, but we think they're out there. To me, over the last 3 years, that's been proven pretty solidly that it's not easy to engage in that, and it's not a clear, simple answer, but that it is out there, and that together we're trying to figure that out. And I would say that's very much what I'm seeing in other places, where organizations are realizing that they can only go so far if they are both figuring out the resources and money question on their own, as well as trying to bend other people to their sort of organization's will, because everybody already has their own agendas. Everybody has their own organizations. Everybody has their own funding, their own communities. And people, I would say, are really recognizing that for today's complexity and the integration of systems that's really happening now and that already has been happening for a while, the only choice really to affect that or to have a real place in that is to play across. And playing across means not saying, here's the answer, everybody.
Sorry, my internet was dying.
What the heck, Louisa?
The internet in this building has not been cooperating with us today.
All right.
So if I pop off again, that might be why.
Gotcha. Can I talk for a second about this? I know I've shown this
Absolutely.
before, but just really quickly as a sort of piece of vocabulary that I found this to be so helpful in so many different circumstances. But again, another mental model of understanding something like a vision can be thought of in this way, that when we think about what that thing we're trying to get to is, you could describe that at a very philosophical level, which is the outer ring. You could describe it at a cultural level, a policy level, all the way down through strategy, tactics, logistics, and tasks. And so to me, again, this is just a framework that I found to be really helpful, that if you're analyzing a current state situation or even what you're trying to get to, this is a really generative framework to be able to say, well, what's that future vision we're talking about? Well, let's start with tasks. What are the types of things that are happening then that are different from the types of things that might be happening now at the very most basic level of activity, all the way out to how do we think about the world or this work at the philosophical level in the future versus now, and starting to define and create space between what we observe today and the way we want to think about or to create that future. And this, to me, this framework just puts some rigor to spaces and meaningful distinctions between something very simple, like here's the way that people physically communicate and interact today versus the way it is in the future, all the way out to, as an ecosystem builder, I view myself as blank, or I think that communities work this way, which is more in the cultural and philosophical space. So again, this is very much offered as a tool that if you like, you can use it. It's again, something that we found to be helpful. That can be a starting point for a lot of things, and also for understanding sometimes where other people are coming from. And the example we always give is that if you're having a very philosophical moment reading and writing and thinking about ecosystem building and about communities, and you go to somebody who is trying to get the word out by putting flyers up on poles, and they're feeling stretched and stressed, and you have a conversation with them about the future of ecosystem building and the philosophy, it's going to be very hard for the two of you to find productive space together. And so just kind of being able to recognize where somebody's currently situated in this model can be helpful. Any thoughts? Violent reactions against anything at all?
I like it.
And again, as a vision building, as an individual or as a community, I would call this a tool that can help with that. I'll spend 10 seconds on this. Would say that the top right thing was trying to talk about that last model we looked at and how ESHIP has worked over the past 3 years, or what it looks like in hindsight, at least, of moving towards some of those more specific things. On the bottom right, you see this concept of an ecosystem. We put the creative process model there and saying this work is already happening. It would be a mistake to try and step out of the work and say, let's try and create a vision. Rather, the work should continue. The vision should emerge from all the work that's actually happening in those different spheres of field entrepreneurs and communities. Finally, I wanted to offer this. This is another 2 minutes or so. I had posted this in one of the Slack channels, but at the ESHIP gathering last year, one of the questions that was raised, and Peter, I don't remember if it was you or somebody else, but it was a question about building, and a few people raised this question of ecosystem building. Is that the right language? Is that the right metaphor? Are ecosystems actually built? And so I started thinking about that, and I just read a little bit about actual ecosystems in nature and the types of models that are talked about and how ecosystems emerge in nature. And what I found was pretty great, which is that I found a really short paper that I thought was kind of the most relevant thing that I could possibly find, which was saying that individual organisms, the way that they come into the world, the way that they evolve, is actually a model for and a recursion of how ecosystems are created and emerge. And so individual organisms, individual cells, individual animals, and then ecosystems, they all follow the same few principles and the same few ways of coming into the world, which I thought was pretty exciting for our work, and maybe has some energy. And just really quickly, the three are, so there's 3 models for how ecosystems emerge. One is the bubble, and take a look at what the example is for the bubble. So at the smallest level, it's basically cells and smaller. So the idea of some kind of a protective, cohesive outside, and then something happening inside. And the example they gave at the macro scale is a forest, which, given the rainforest analogy, I thought, okay, there's something worth poking on here. The second is waves, and the third is crystals. And I just want to say that for me, this is like the very beginning of what I'm guessing is an exciting rabbit hole that I kind of want to go down and actually learn enough about how ecosystems form in the world and what it means to actually support those ecosystems. Are there actually builders, or is it something else that enables these? And so when I personally think about, and this is again kind of anecdotal, but when I think about the curiosity I have around how ecosystems come into being and what a vision for ecosystem building might be, it means learning enough about these that I could figure out what the possible ways of talking about ecosystem building, and if that's the right metaphor and the right way of relating to that. To me, this is a piece of the whole. I think people who do these types of explorations and types of learning, which we know from our community, there's a lot of people working on this, finding the right way for all those bits of curiosity and bits of learning to fit together into a whole is our work. I would also say that for me, I view that as something that evolves. We should not view this as something like on blank date, we finally set the vision for what ecosystem building is and then it's done. I think it's great to have meaningful points of, touch points of meaning that people can rally around. But I think the more comfortable we are with the spirit of evolution and continued growth and change, the better and the more relevant that's going to be. So there you go. That's my personal ecosystem building vision curiosity. Okay, thank you.
It's a lot to think about. Oh my gosh.
That was my goal.
Now that you said that, I'm wondering, I feel like we're ecosystem catalyzers, because it's things that are out there, and when you connect people or when you empower or spark, so the people that I know in our community, the people that I've met along the way, it almost seems like that's what we do. We are the catalyzing thing that connects the nodes or empowers the opportunities or something like that. And I like thinking about us as the catalyzer. I know that I hear the inner Christine in my head who is saying, as we talk about impact, and she's not a big fan of impact because it could be a negative impact or a positive impact. So she would like to think that we're going to do it, use our powers for good. And I don't know that that always is the case. I think we strive for using that catalyzing model to move towards positive outputs or positive outcomes. But we're definitely, we live in that world where it's not as much about the outputs as it is about the outcomes, right? It's the doing together as opposed to the product that we get out. So I think that that's important to bring into the conversation, and the ideas of values and vision is the vision part is definitely something where people thrive or communities thrive. So that's a positive, but yeah.
Can I just throw a question out there? Given that part of what I think we understand the goal here to be of, Kaufman having, laid something out there and begun to define a space and advocated for something, but recognizing in that spirit of systems, leadership, and transformation that has to spread out. And they've always invited people into this process and said, we don't have the answers, but we think they're out there and we want to help you get to them. I would love to know what people think is the need. You know, what do you need as individuals, and what do we need as a group of people working on this that would help us get there? So just broadly, what do we need as yourself or for the group around a vision?
I would say that, like, as a practitioner, a need like that is. I have like mixed feelings about like working with foundations and like what that means for the work that we do, because a great, like, if we are just real with ourselves, a great many things that we do as ecosystem like practitioners are funded by foundations, whether they're the Kauffman Foundation or whatever. And so we can say what it is that we want to do all day, but like if those things don't align with like the priorities of the foundations that are mostly funding our work, then they don't get done. So I think, I know that the foundation, and like, I know Andy's not on this call, but it's being recorded. The foundations often will say, well, we don't want to come up with the thing and tell you what it is that you like. We want you to come up with the thing. And we're like trying to do our work. And we're like, please just tell us what it is that you want. And we can decide if we agree or not. And we can decide if we'll apply for the funding, or we can decide how we will like work with our programs within that vision. But like as a practitioner, so I'm not really talking about as a ESHIP, person right now, but as a practitioner, I don't think that like what we need is for the foundations to tell us like what we're gonna do. But I do think that what is helpful need is to have, like, instead of the foundations being like, you come up with the thing, like, we're working, we don't have time to come up with the thing. With all of your money, you come up with the thing and then give us the opportunity to tweak it. Like that, like it, as I've been sitting in this kind of in between of like having the privilege to sit kind of with the people that are at this particular foundation and some others that I'm working with. I'm kind of sitting in this in between place where like I hear the frustrations of people on my team and people in the work that we're doing. They're just like, these funders are giving us more work to do, and we obviously appreciate and want and think is very necessary for those that are funding the work to provide space for community input. But sometimes providing space for the community to give input can be another thing for the community to have to put on our to-do list.
So the foundation coming out with a draft, to use Andy's language and say, here's what we're thinking. What do you think of this? And getting your input on that would be helpful. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Or if they're like, we don't want to come up with 3 options or come up with things and then provide, like, give us something to react to. Instead of making us come up with the thing. And so I feel like, especially for this, like, the mission, vision, values part, as sitting in that at ESHIP and trying to facilitate that, and everybody having completely like widely different ranging things, I'm like, this is not something that I feel equipped to singularly like lead people through, because I feel like sometimes we'll never get anything done if we try to please everybody, but instead provide some sort of framework or scaffolding or fence that, like, hey, we're working within this fence. Like, what do you think about that? Like, what do you think about how we're thinking about it? Here are some opportunities to provide feedback and make sure that we don't have blind spots, or, do you jive with this? If we are thinking about it this way, is that really taking into account all the different perspectives, blah, blah, blah.
Thank you.
That's all that I have as far as, a need in the context of this conversation. Anybody else have any other thoughts?
Yep.
Yeah, Peter, Tiffany, I'd love to hear if there's,
I want to go back to, I'm going to pull up, I was scribing them and I wrote it. The Vantage Points model. That was really interesting to me because it reminded me a lot of like levels of cognitive and emotional development, and going from tasks to philosophy. You know, those are totally different. You have to have a different level of maturity to think philosophically versus task oriented. And I know my personal strengths are always closer to the task side than to the philosophy side. So I guess what I need, I always need clarity, because in the back of my mind, my question is always like, okay, how can I help? I always want to help, but I best can help when someone tells me very specifically what to do. And so thinking of vision, I mean, that's so far on the philosophy side, and, you know, even some of the books, like, thank you, Cecilia, for sending the book. I'm forgetting what it's called.
The Future book.
Yes, the Future book. Woo! It's like really deep.
So Peter, we're talking about the Communities of the Future book, preparing for a world that hasn't happened yet. So
yes,
Rick Spire, Neil Richardson book.
And so I guess that's what I need is clarity, but then it's a paradox, because that's exactly what we're doing, I feel, is, you know, trying to get some clarity. So we're in it right now. So I guess continued perseverance is what I need to stick with it. But I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, but I feel like both of you have said more direction rather than less, and, you know, let me see if it resonates with where I'm at. Let me give feedback on it. But you would not be upset if, you know, if something was put forward. You'd be grateful.
Yeah.
You want to have input. You want to have input to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think, Peter?
You know, it's interesting. I mean, Tiffany, unfortunately, I was a philosophy major. So I'm on the other side of the globe.
That is unfortunate.
Huh? So but then on the other hand, I went on and finished with my education in industrial engineering. So I mean, you figure that out. So I guess I have followed my instincts around sort of creative meandering. You know, having a sense as to what's sort of the ethical, moral, philosophical compass on stuff, and then use that as the focus point, the center point, in terms of, you know, how do you sort out circumstances as you're dealing with them. So that's really was my question around the you know, can you leave a vision issue? Can you leave the vision to circumstances more than but still have a set of core principles and the like, and work from there. And so so that's how I tend to work and think. I also am really skeptical of I'm cognizant of human hubris and our ability to somehow think that we can actually predict the future, and that we can prepare for all contingencies as a result of that. There's a guy, Abu Talib, I think it's Nicholas Tassim. He's Lebanese, by the way, and he's an absolute maniac. And I'll share the site with you later. But his book is around how to be anti-fragile. So he thinks about things in terms of, you know, what makes people fragile. and you increasingly become fragile when you convince yourself that you can actually plan your way through to the future. And instead, think about ways in which you can thrive when black swan events actually occur, things that are completely unpredictable, but they happen. And so, so that's why I've sort of gone down this path. And I think you're right. I mean, I was the one who raised the question as to whether you can be an ecosystem builder versus something else. And the sort of behind that was the question, when you build an ecosystem, it's something purposeful that achieves a specific set of goals and objectives. But then in that respect, it becomes very limiting. And I understand and appreciate ecosystems as being, as this guy would describe them, as sort of anti-fragile. That they have the capacity to be able to absorb situations that would otherwise be unpredictable, at least successful ecosystems. And so anyway, that sort of frames some of my thinking on this. And I'm sorry if it's really philosophical, but again, that's where my brain works sometimes.
The Vantage Points model means no apologies.
Yeah. So anyway, that's just. But I'll share the book title. I would, if you read it, just pay attention to the first half and screw the examples in the back, because at that point he kind of loses me and a bunch of folks. But the basic concepts, I think, are pretty interesting.
Okay, so in the interest of time, I want to wrap, but I think it's really productive conversation. Yes, Peter.
Real quick, I shared a link, and then Mike responded to that. The link is an op-ed that was written by the head of Groundswell.
Okay.
And she talks about foundations. And Louisa, that was really in direct response to what you were saying, reaffirming a lot of what you were saying, frankly, but even more so. So just, it's a great
sharing that. I'll take a look. And I do have to peace out because we have a team outing that we're going to have to go.
I'm going to put it in the parking lot for in the agenda, and have fun in your team outing. Tell Candace and all these people.
Yeah, I'll tell everybody, hey.
Yeah, and I think that as we delve deeper, maybe we can think about a draft or something, and then it gives us a starting point. I do want to say that next month, this call is supposed to be on the 18th of December. I will not be here. I will invite all of you to carry on if you choose to. I think it's a conversation to have in Slack to see if that's what you want to do. So, check out early for the holidays or delve deep or whatever you want to do. But it will be recorded regardless. So, cool. Thank you, everyone.
See you guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.